Someone asked me to make a video on if Mike Tyson used weight training in the 80s or not. So I've done as much research on this as I possibly can. Now, I'll first get to this picture I'm showing you. This is a picture of Mike Tyson at 14. Yes, he looks muscular, but he's not overly muscular like a lot of people say he is. I mean, I know a lot of people when they're 14 that have done training, and yes, they do look quite big for being 14. But it is worth noting when you're looking at this picture, he's very slender to what he was when he fought as a professional when he was 18 years old. So he did put on quite a lot of muscle in that time, and he probably put on a lot of muscle from when he was younger to when he was 14 as well, obviously. First thing I want to discuss is the workout routine that's all over the internet. And it goes like this if you haven't heard of it. 2,000 sit-ups a day, plus 800 dips, 500 press-ups, 500 shrugs, with a 30 kilogram barbell, and 10 minutes of neck exercises. So, one thing worth noting about that is the 30 kilogram barbell shrugs. So, even in this routine, there are weights involved in it. So that's one thing worth pointing out. Here's a quote from, I think it's a outtake for one of Mike Tyson's book, and it reads this: At 12, Tyson was arrested for purse snatching and sent to the Tyrone School for Boys. He soon met Bobby Stewart, a counsellor and former boxer, who saw in Tyson a pugnacious kid who had grown to 200 pounds and could bench press more than his weight. Now, I doubt Tyson was 200 pounds when he was 12 years old. I'll show you the picture in the second half of this video of Mike Tyson and how he looked when he was 12. Mike Tyson when he was 12 looked he looked very thin in the face. He looked a bit like a girl, I've got to say. And if he was 200 pounds, he must have been a very chubby 200 pounds. But from the photos of him when he was 12, didn't look 200 pounds. But it is worth noting in this that they also bring up bench pressing more than his weight, which would make you think that Mike Tyson was lifting very heavy weights when he was young. So we've got two accounts here of Mike Tyson lifting weights in the 80s. And now a lot of people might say, well, we've not got any video evidence of Mike Tyson using weights in the 80s, but we have plenty of it in the 90s, so that's when it looks like he started doing weights. So apart from the training program that mentions weights and Bobby Stewart bringing up Mike Tyson lifting more than his body weight at bench press, which is very impressive for someone that young. Well, the thing is, we don't have any video evidence of Mike Tyson doing press-ups or dips as well in the 80s. It doesn't mean he didn't do them. So just because we don't have any video evidence of him doing weight training in the 80s does not mean Mike Tyson was not doing weight training in the 80s. From some evidence points to Mike Tyson doing weight training in the 80s. From an eyewitness and from his own training program. Now I'll bring something else up, and that's drugs. Now, because doing weight training is not the only reason you could look as massive so young as Mike Tyson did. I'm not saying he definitely took drugs, I'm just wanting you to point out, and it's worth noting, some of this quotes and facts I found out about Mike Tyson. And I thought it'd be interesting to put into the video. You can make of it whatever you want. So a quick fact is 12% of male high school students and 1% of female students have used anabolic steroids by the time they are seniors. Now, Mike Tyson admits taking cocaine, crack cocaine, drinking a lot of alcohol, all the way back till he was 11 years old. So it is not beyond possibility that he could also have taken steroids, especially when he started boxing, to help him. You know, one of his friends that have given him, you know, a young little kid, you know, crack cocaine, alcohol, might also say, oh, do you want to try these steroids that could help you out in your boxing training? and it very well did. It's a possibility. Now this is another quote. I'll just read it to you. By 1990, Tyson seemed to have lost direction, and his personal life was in disarray amidst reports of a less vigorous training prior to the Douglas match. Contrary to the reports that Tyson was out of shape, sources noticed his pronounced muscles, absence of body fat, and weight of 220.5 pounds, only 2 pounds more than he had weighed when he beat Mike Tyson just 20 months earlier. So what this quote is obviously saying is, even though he was reported to not caring too much about the training, in his book he talks about just having sex with prostitutes, the maid, in Japan before the Douglas fight, and not doing much training at all, or as little training as he possibly could get away with. He pretty much looked the same, muscle mass wise, body fat wise. Could be also another indicator to him using steroids. Now, this is another quote from Mike Tyson as well. I had to use my whizzer, which was a fake penis, where you put someone else's clean urine in to pass your drug test. So that's Mike Tyson admitting that he used a fake penis to pass drug tests. Now, it is also worth noting that when he's talking about this, when he's using this quote, I'm not going to take it out of context. He is talking about passing a drug test so he can avoid being testing positive for cocaine and pot. He's not talking about steroids, so I'm not trying to take this out of context. But if you are trying to, use a fake penis to pass, tests for cocaine and pot, and he could have been doing the same for using a fake penis to avoid being testing positive for any performance enhancing drugs. It's a possibility, of course. Now, this was a question put to Mike Tyson after he had retired, and I think the actual video is on YouTube, to tell you the truth. It's one he's talking to, I think it's a girl, a female and a male presenter in a TV show. I think he's wearing a white t-shirt. I'm not going to look up the exact video, but I'll read the quote to you. And the presenter asks him, what would you do differently if you could start your training all over again? Mike Tyson replied, growth hormones. I would have used growth hormones like the rest of the athletes. So there is quite a strong possibility Mike Tyson used performance enhancing drugs and steroids to get the body that he had in the 80s. I'm not saying it's a fact, but there's a lot of evidence that actually backs up that he could have been using steroids, and maybe it wasn't just the weight training. But anyway, to get to the point of this video, there is strong evidence that Mike Tyson was using weights in the 80s. And there's also a strong possibility that he could also use performance enhancing drugs, whether people like to hear it or not.